December 21st, Finland. A Soviet soldier fell dead in the snow, then another, then 3 more. In the hours that followed, 25 Soviet soldiers would fall, not from machine gun fire, not from artillery, but from single rifle shots that seemed to come from nowhere. The Soviet commanders knew there was a sniper somewhere, invisible in the frozen forest, killing their men one by one, but where? They scoured the tree line. They fired artillery at suspicious positions. They sent counter-snipers to hunt him down. But they never saw the 5'3" farmer lying in the snow without a telescopic scope. Because he wasn't hunting like a soldier. He was hunting like a Finnish trapper. How did techniques used to hunt Arctic foxes in sub-zero temperatures transform a dairy farmer into the deadliest sniper in military history? To understand how Simo Häyhä was able to do this, you need to understand where he was and what he was fighting against. November 30th, 1939. The Soviet Union invaded Finland with overwhelming force. 750,000 Soviet soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 3,000 aircraft. Against them stood Finland, a nation of 3.7 million people with an army of only 300,000 men. Most had hunting rifles. Some didn't even have uniforms. The world watched and waited for Finland to fall in days, maybe weeks. The Soviets expected the same. They thought this would be easy, but they didn't understand Finland. They didn't understand Finnish forests, and they didn't understand Finnish winters. The temperature dropped to -40°C, the kind of cold that freezes fuel in tank engines. The kind of cold that makes metal so brittle it shatters. The kind of cold that kills exposed soldiers in minutes. The Soviets wore dark uniforms that stood out against white snow. They moved in large formations on open roads. They were trained for conventional warfare. The Finns wore white camouflage. They moved silently through forests on skis. They were trained by nature itself. And leading them, invisible in the snow, was a 3-4-year-old dairy farmer named Simo Häyhä, 5'3" tall, 140 pounds, a small man with a quiet voice. If you saw him in a photograph, you wouldn't think he was a soldier. You'd think he was exactly what he was, a poor farmer from Rautjärvi. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905 in Rautjärvi, a rural farming community in southeastern Finland. His family was poor, very poor, 7 children to feed. Winters so harsh that food ran out before spring arrived, so they hunted, not for sport, for survival. Simo learned to shoot before he turned 10, and what did he hunt? Arctic hares, foxes, grouse, pine martens, and the most challenging prey of all, European lynx. Now, if you've never hunted a lynx in a Finnish winter, you don't understand how difficult it is. A lynx can hear a human heartbeat from 50 meters away. It can detect movement through dense forest in near total darkness. Its eyesight is so sharp it can spot a mouse moving under snow. If your breathing is wrong, it's gone. If you blink at the wrong moment, it's gone. If your rifle moves 1 centimeter too fast, it vanishes into the forest. So how do you hunt a lynx in -30° weather? You don't move. You don't breathe normally. You become part of the winter itself. Simo's father taught him a technique used by Finnish trappers for centuries. You choose your position hours before dawn. You dig into the snow. You cover yourself completely. You pack snow around your rifle barrel to prevent steam from your breath condensing on the cold metal. And then you wait. For hours. Sometimes for days. Controlled breathing. Zero movement. Absolute stillness. You become invisible. Military records later documented that Häyhä had supernatural patience. He could remain motionless in -40° temperatures for 20 hours straight. He never used a telescopic sight because the lens glare could give away his position. He kept snow in his mouth to prevent his breath from creating visible vapor in the frozen air. He created a small pile of snow in front of his position to absorb the muzzle blast and prevent snow from kicking up when he fired. These weren't military tactics. These were survival techniques learned in the forests of Rautjärvi during the Great Depression. And there was another skill. In the dense Finnish forests during winter, the sun barely rises above the horizon. Navigation is nearly impossible. Trees all look identical when covered in snow. So trappers mark their territory. Small cuts on tree bark. Arrangements of branches. Patterns in the snow that only they recognize. They create invisible trails through terrain that would kill anyone else. Simo Häyhä learned these skills hunting food for his family during the harshest winters in Finnish history. And in 1925, when he was 20 years old, he completed his mandatory military service. He was assigned to a bicycle battalion. Nothing special, no elite training, no sniper school, just a farm boy who knew how to shoot. He returned to his farm, raised dairy cows, and lived a quiet life. For 14 years, Simo Häyhä was nobody. A farmer, a hunter, a man the world would never notice. And then, on November 30th, 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland. And suddenly, all those years hunting in frozen forests became the most valuable training in the Finnish army. On December 17, 1939, Simo Häyhä's 34th birthday, he reported for duty. He was assigned to the 6th Company of the 34th Infantry Regiment. His unit was sent to the Kala River, one of the most critical defensive positions in Finland. The Soviets were advancing with overwhelming numbers. If Kola fell, the entire Finnish defensive line would collapse. Simo Häyhä was given a rifle, not a modern sniper rifle, not a scoped weapon. Just a standard Finnish Mosin Nagant M28-30, a bolt-action rifle with iron sights. The same type of rifle he'd used to hunt elk and lynx for 25 years. And then he disappeared into the forest. The Soviets never saw him coming. December 21st, 1939, the first day. Simo Häyhä positioned himself in a snowbank overlooking a Soviet advance route. He dug himself into the snow exactly as he'd done hunting Arctic foxes. He packed snow around his position. He put snow in his mouth to cool his breath, and then he waited. At 0820 hours, a Soviet patrol appeared. 40 men, moving carelessly, talking, smoking, making noise. They had no idea they were being watched. Häyhä's rifle moved 1 centimeter. His finger touched the trigger. One shot. The lead Soviet soldier dropped. Before the others could react, Häyhä had worked the bolt. Second shot. Another soldier fell. Panic. The Soviets scattered. They fired randomly into the forest. They had no idea where the shots came from. Häyhä remained perfectly still. He waited 20 minutes. The Soviets regrouped. They began moving forward again. Häyhä fired again. 3 more kills in 15 seconds. The Soviets retreated. In his first day of combat, Simo Häyhä killed 25 Soviet soldiers, and he was just getting started. The tactic was simple but devastatingly effective. Häyhä would position himself before dawn in a location overlooking Soviet routes. He would remain completely motionless for hours. Sometimes 15 hours. Sometimes 20 hours, without food, without water, in temperatures that would kill an unprepared man in 30 minutes. He would wait for Soviet patrols, and then he would fire. 1 shot. 1 kill. Bolt action. Second shot. Second kill. The Soviets would panic. They would fire machine guns into the forest. They would call artillery strikes. They would send search parties. And Häyhä would vanish. He moved through the forest on skis. He knew every trail, every frozen stream, every hidden path. He had marked the territory the same way he marked his hunting grounds. Small indicators that only he recognized. He could navigate in total darkness through terrain that Soviet soldiers couldn't cross in daylight. And every night he would return to Finnish lines. Resupply. Rest for a few hours. And then disappear again before dawn. The pattern continued for days, then weeks. December 22nd. 15 confirmed kills. December 23rd. 20 confirmed kills. December 24th. Christmas Eve. 17 confirmed kills. The Soviets began to realize they had a problem. There was a sniper in the Kala sector who was decimating their forces. They called him the White Death, Belaya Smirt in Russian. They offered rewards for information about his location. They sent counter-sniper teams to hunt him. They brought in their best marksmen, elite Soviet snipers, men trained in specialized schools, men with scoped rifles and years of experience. And Simo Häyhä killed them all, one by one. Here's why the Soviet snipers failed. They used telescopic sights, professional equipment, state-of-the-art optics. But in minus 40-degree temperatures, those scopes were a liability. The glass fogged. The metal contracted and threw off the calibration. And worst of all, the sun reflecting off the lens gave away their position. Häyhä saw the glint, adjusted his aim. 1 shot. Dead Soviet sniper. The Soviets sent 12 counter-sniper teams to hunt Häyhä in January 1940 alone. Häyhä killed all 12 snipers. with iron sights, at ranges exceeding 400 meters. Using the same rifle he'd used to shoot elk, the Soviet command was desperate. They tried artillery bombardment. They would identify an area where Häyhä might be hiding and shell it for hours. Destroying entire sections of forest, Häyhä would hear the shells coming. He would ski away, wait for the bombardment to end, return to a different position, and resume killing. They tried aerial reconnaissance, spotter planes searching for the lone sniper, but Häyhä's snow camouflage was perfect. His positions were so well concealed that pilots flying 100 meters overhead couldn't see him. They tried night patrols, large groups of soldiers searching the forest after dark. Häyhä would hear them coming from 500 meters away. He would move silently through the darkness, circle behind them, kill the rear guards, and disappear before anyone realized what happened. The Soviets were fighting a ghost. By January 15, 1940, Simo Häyhä had killed 200 Soviet soldiers in 45 days. That's an average of 4.4 kills per day, every single day, for a month and a half, with iron sights. In one of the harshest environments on Earth, Soviet officers began refusing to patrol certain sectors. Some units threatened mutiny rather than enter the Kala forest. The psychological impact was devastating. Soviet soldiers knew that every time they stepped into that forest, the White Death was watching. They just didn't know where. But Häyhä wasn't only killing with his rifle. At night, he used a Suomi KP-31 submachine gun. Finnish military records document at least 200 additional kills with the submachine gun during close-range night engagements. That means Simo Häyhä killed over 400 Soviet soldiers in 100 days. Over 500 when you include unconfirmed kills. That's 5 men per day, every day, for more than 3 months. The deadliest sniper in military history. But the Soviets finally got lucky. March 6, 1940, day 98 of the Winter War. Simo Häyhä was in his usual position, dug into the snow, perfectly camouflaged, hunting. At approximately 1,030 hours, a Soviet soldier got lucky. He fired an explosive bullet randomly into the forest. It struck Häyhä in the lower left jaw. The impact was catastrophic. The explosive round tore through his jaw, destroyed half his face, knocked out several teeth, blew away part of his cheekbone. Any normal person would have died instantly. Simo Häyhä didn't. He remained conscious. He picked up his rifle with his one functioning arm, and he killed the Soviet soldier who shot him. Then he skied 3 kilometers back to Finnish lines, with half his face destroyed, bleeding profusely. In -30-degree weather, he collapsed when he reached the Finnish trenches. His comrades found him. They didn't think he would survive. They transported him to a field hospital. The doctors said he had hours to live, maybe less. Simo Häyhä fell into a coma. The war ended 7 days later. On March 13, 1940, Finland and the Soviet Union signed a peace treaty. Finland lost 10% of its territory, but Finland survived. The Soviet Union had expected an easy victory in 2 weeks. Instead, they suffered over 300,000 casualties. The Finns suffered 70,000 casualties. But they had fought the Soviet giant to a standstill, and in a hospital bed, Simo Häyhä remained unconscious. The doctors had given up hope. But on March 13, 1940, the same day the peace treaty was signed, Häyhä woke up. His face was destroyed. He would require multiple reconstructive surgeries. He would never look the same. But he was alive. Simo Häyhä spent a year in hospitals, multiple surgeries, reconstructive procedures to rebuild his jaw and face. He learned to speak again, learned to eat again. The recovery was agonizing. But Häyhä never complained. When reporters asked him about the war, his answer was simple. I did what needed to be done. When they asked how he killed so many men, he said, I just pointed the rifle and shot. When they asked if he felt remorse, he said, I was defending my country. There is no remorse in that. In 1940, Simo Häyhä was promoted to second lieutenant, the only battlefield promotion in Finnish history. He received the Medal of Liberty, the Cross of Liberty, the Medal of Courage. But he never talked about his achievements. He returned to his farm in Rautjärvi, raised dairy cows, hunted elk and lynx, lived quietly, For 62 years after the war, Simo Häyhä lived a simple life. He never married. He never sought fame. He avoided journalists. He refused to be called a hero. When historians finally tracked him down in the 1,990 seconds to record his story, his response was always the same: "I did my duty, nothing more." On April 1, 2002, Simo Häyhä died peacefully at age 96. He was buried in Finland. A quiet farmer. A hunter. A man who had killed over 500 enemy soldiers in 100 days, and then returned to his cows and his forest and never spoke about it again. But Simo Häyhä's impact goes beyond kill counts. In December 1939, the Soviet Union invaded with 750,000 soldiers. They expected victory in 2 weeks. Instead, they encountered Finnish soldiers who fought like winter itself. And leading them was a 5-foot 3-inch farmer who knew how to disappear. The Soviets lost over 300,000 men. The Winter War became a humiliation for the Soviet military. It exposed weaknesses that would later cost them dearly. And it proved that overwhelming numbers mean nothing against defenders fighting for their homeland. The Finnish defensive line held, the Kola River was never crossed, and Simo Häyhä, invisible in the snow, was a major reason why. When someone finally asked him late in his life about the secret of his success, his answer was simple: stay out of sight, keep moving, always have an escape route, and most importantly, patience. These weren't military tactics taught in academies. These were survival skills, learned hunting Arctic foxes in Finnish winters. Skills his father taught him when he was a child because his family needed food to survive. Because in the end, this is the story of Simo Häyhä, a poor farmer from Rautjärvi who learned to hunt in the harshest environment on earth, who went to war with a rifle and iron sights, who discovered that the same skills that kept him invisible to lynx could keep him invisible to entire armies, who used snow to cool his breath, who marked his territory like a trapper, who stayed completely motionless for 20 hours at -40 degrees Celsius, who killed over 500 men in 100 days and then went home, milked his cows, hunted elk, and never spoke about it again. Because for Simo Häyhä, it wasn't about glory, it wasn't about medals, it wasn't about being called a hero, it was about defending his home, exactly as his father taught him. If you found this story important, if you believe soldiers like Simo Häyhä deserve to be remembered, please like this video. It helps YouTube's algorithm show these stories to more people. Subscribe to the channel for more forgotten war stories. And in the comments below, tell us, where are you watching from?